Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So, this is chapter 3, I guess you could say, of my mental health blog journey. And this one really definitely hit home a lot. I found myself slightly kind of reeling from writing this one. It was much more impactful and had a few realizations about it along the way. And I think it's gonna I hope it resonates with some of you out there as well. So it's the constant battle of eluding confrontation versus sucking it up and dealing with it. And I have a long history with this, and let's get right into it. So all my life, I've considered myself a very level-headed, easygoing type of person. I see myself as someone who likes to maintain the status quo. I've made a point of not starting confrontations in my life, focus on diffusing anything I've found myself in, and eventually just avoiding them as much as possible. They're unpleasant. Sometimes I would, calm the situation if I thought it was a pointless conflict. Other times I just want to keep the peace with whoever was involved. My focus was to maintain whatever relationship was there. Growing up, I was a good kid. I was a teacher's pet, I was a mama's boy. I can admit it. I kept my nose clean, stayed out of trouble, and maintained my reputation as a good kid or a nice guy. I don't recall ever being afraid of conflicts themselves. I don't remember actually being afraid of getting into a fist fight. I wasn't worried about the pain. I was afraid of the aftermath and the long-term effects. If it was a school bully, I was afraid of being suspended and getting into trouble with my parents or teachers. If it was a work disagreement, I was afraid of being looked upon unfavorably. I feared that a confrontation or disagreement would only lead to further of those issues because we disagreed. However, I'm coming to realize that this has spiraled out of control to an unconscious mindset of I just don't stand up for myself at all anymore. If I'm ever slighted, wronged, challenged, insulted, or disrespected, I usually just find some way to end the discussion or even outright agree with the person to try and ensure that this person's opinion of me remains positive and agreeable. Looking back on my life, it didn't really matter the circumstance. If it was school bullies, dealing with family, people challenging my work, asshole strangers, or relationship disagreements. It was just easier to do nothing or admit they were right, bundle up my feelings and shove it into the back of my brain and lock it away forever. If I was slighted or insulted, I'd usually tell myself that it's just not worth causing a stink over. I'd take the high road and or not engage. As time would go on, however, I'd find myself dwelling on the interaction, analyzing and overanalyzing whatever they said. That alone would adjust my mindset on how I'd interact with them and probably other people as well going forward. If it was someone I had a relationship with, family, colleague, friend, etc., I'd likely justify it with, well, that's not what they meant, or I'm sure I'm misinterpreting that. And I'm also sure that many times that was in fact the case. But does that mean having a reaction was wrong? Would it not make more sense to get at least clarification, maybe adjust how that person talks to me then going forward, making that relationship better for the both of us? Simultaneously, I don't want people to think that they need to be extra careful about what they say to me, even though they might. I don't want someone to have to walk on eggshells when having a conversation with me. I don't consider myself someone who is easily offended, but maybe I'm easily insulted, if that's a thing. I absolutely admit that I overanalyze and overthink things that are said to me, especially from family and people in the workplace. But I shouldn't let injustice slide. So bunching that all together, to me, the balance that I'm looking for is like a paradox. I want to be treated with respect, but I also don't want to be an asshole. My brain has determined that achieving that kind of equilibrium is impossible. In order to command respect, I have to be a dick and not care what people think about me. And I care way too much about what people think of me. That in and of itself is likely the underlying problem. I know I wrote it down somewhere before, and I can't remember if I said it on a video already, but I know for a fact that in my current state, I'm not capable of handling a job in a management position of any kind, because I'm wired, and I use that word a lot, but it's pretty applicable. I'm wired to do everything I can to please everyone, and it's always at my own expense. I care more about people's opinions of me than of how I'm treated or I'm spoken to. I care more about how they feel about me than of my own mental health. I'm just now conditioned instinctually to prefer living in mental torture than think that someone at my job has a problem with me. That's where I'm at. And it's unavoidable. I realize that. It's unavoidable no matter what your job title is or what position you're in at your company. You can't please everyone. I know that. But yeah, this feeds back into one of my fears from my first video, how I'd often triple or quadruple check my work in accounting or payroll before I would speak to anyone about it. Any coworker, any colleague, client, didn't matter. I needed to be sure that if there was a confrontation or frank discussion of some kind, and there often was, that I knew I was right and I had backup to my argument. But looking back on it, even if they challenged me, it usually didn't matter how prepared I was. I was wrong, they were right. It was just easier. That's probably where this all stems from. So, thinking about all this, it got me thinking about the bigger picture. And just to be super clear, what I'm about to speak about relates to no one in particular at all. But why do I think this way? Well, when I do have a conflict, a disagreement, or an argument, primarily at the workplace is where I'm getting this. Where I'm stemming this from. My opinion of that and view of that person definitely changes drastically. Does that mean I hold grudges? Maybe. I don't know. If I was right, and I knew I was right, and I had backup, and I had like a supervisor or a manager like review my work and agreed that I was right, and the person I'm dealing with was wrong and they're being a dick about it, well, yeah, in my mind, now you're just a jerk. And I'll likely dread interacting with that person from that point forward. Will I bring up the current argument I'm having with this person in future conversations? I'd like to think not, but it's going to be on my mind. I guarantee you that. And trying to think about this rationally and logically, which is my specialty, I don't think that kind of cognitive response is unusual. Interactions with other people constantly adjust your opinion and view of that person, whether it be minor or major. But I guess I'm concerned that maybe they affect my judgments more than other people's. I don't know if any of this makes any sense, but I think you get my point. On a positive note, I will be the first to admit when I've made a mistake. I apologize immediately, and then do everything I can to make it right, if it's possible. And most importantly, I learn from it. I take a great deal of pride in those things. If I'm wrong, and I come to realize it, you're going to get an apology, and you're going to get a way to fix it somehow, if it's at all possible. It's the people that are so stubborn and have misplaced confidence or bravado that rile me up, or they maybe blow their issue out of proportion. And there's just such a huge part of me that is the last thing I want anyone to ever see me as, is someone of that false confidence that never backs down until they get what they want. I can admit my failures. I can admit my wrongdoings. And in that way, I'm happy to keep the peace. But it's the people that don't meet me in the middle that send me on a spiral downward. I would be mortified if I knew that someone saw me as that kind of person. I also acknowledge that there are just going to be people in my life that I'm not going to see eye to eye with on everything. It's just inevitable. My brain still works like crazy to find ways to be seen as likable, approachable, and easygoing. What that seems to morph into is that I'm then seen as a pushover, someone who is easy to manipulate, and people can just get whatever they want from me at all times. I need to work on realizing that not everyone is going to like me. And that's okay. My logical mind knows that's true and fact. But I need to be liked by everyone, and it's a pathological need that needs to be chipped away at. One of the things that crossed my mind a lot as I wrote this goes back to my fear of those long-term effects I mentioned earlier. I think about things like, what if I need this person's help in the future? What if I need a reference from them someday, if it's someone in the workplace? What if I need something important from them? What if their negative opinion of me somehow costs me something in the future? Like opportunities, maybe favors, maybe even a promotion, etc. It's very restricting to have these thoughts, but they're there, and I can't shut them up. Second guessing everything I say and everything people say to me is exhausting. It's just how my brain operates right now. So when I stew and dwell on these things and not stand up for myself, it's like pouring gasoline on the inferno that is my anxiety disorder. As we all do, I wish I knew what I know now as a child. I wish I knew the actual pros and cons of what the actual pros and cons of confrontation were and are. I constantly relive interactions with the bullies of my childhood and think about what I'd do differently. I mean, who hasn't done that? The age-old question, if you had 5 minutes to talk to your younger self, what would you tell them? My answer is always the same. I'd say, tell Dad to quit his job, because that's what wound up killing him. And I'd tell myself to do what was necessary to get through to the bullies in my life. I had all kinds of bullies when I was younger. I had people that would follow me home from school and taunt me and throw things at me. I had a kid who was literally half my size and in my grade constantly pick on me. He probably still is half my size, but he had bigger friends and I just didn't want to get in trouble by confronting him. I had a big dude, big guy, a few grades ahead of me. He actually pushed me into lockers and actually wrapped his hands around my throat during an assembly. He was sitting behind me in the rafters. All because we shared the same last name, and a unique one, and I was just an easy bullying target for him. I had the usuals too. People made fun of my weight, made fun of me getting rejected by a girl, made fun of my intelligence because they were intimidated by it. And these are just a few examples. I'm kind of trying to be glib about it, but this shit was mean. But there's something I can do about it now. I can't change the past is what I'm getting at. Bullies come in all shapes and sizes, and from different perspectives. There was one person who made fun of my weight regularly, like daily basis. And I actually considered him a friend, believe it or not. I kind of chalked it up to teenage boy hazing banter, I guess. To this day, I don't believe he said those things with actual malicious intent. But it always hurt. And he got away with it. People bully others for a multitude of reasons. In all my time since those days, and I've done some reading, listened to some podcasts, and through counseling in the past, the most likely scenario I've come to believe the most likely is their home life was very likely very unpleasant, and they were just lashing out at anyone they could. I had a lovely home life growing up, so they were probably pretty envious of me. But how do you get through to these people? Bullies all speak different languages. The friend of mine that made fun of my weight probably would have stopped if I just had a frank and stern conversation with him. Sat him down, said, "Listen, man, like I know we're just trying to, make fun of each other and, whatever. Like it's not okay. You need to stop." The ones that made fun of me for getting rejected by a girl might have changed their tone if I had a clever comeback. I don't think that actually is true, but it's fun to think about. And sometimes getting someone else involved can help, like the guy who choked me. He was older, bigger, stronger, and was just straight meaner than I was. I reported his behavior to someone, and it didn't happen again. But then anyone who's been bullied knows that you worry about tattling and making it worse if I got them in trouble. Much like helping someone who struggles with mental health, there's no universal answer on dealing with these people. I believe that what the bullies of my childhood clearly were lacking was a respect for me. And that could be seen in many different ways. They were jealous of whatever it is I had they didn't. Saw me as an easy target to lash out at. Or they just didn't like me and they knew I wouldn't do anything about it. We could theorize as to a bunch of different theories. Theorize about theories? How about that? All I'm saying is that some of the people I've had to deal with just could not be reasoned with. Words didn't earn their respect, and my doing nothing about their behavior just reinforced their view of me as an easy target, and they'd just get away with it. What I would tell my younger self is that I had been exaggerating, significantly exaggerating what the long-term effects of a confrontation would likely be. There's an old quote from a Keanu Reeves movie from the 90s called The Replacements. And when I heard it, it really stuck in my mind since then. It goes like this. Pain heals, chicks dig scars, and glory lasts forever. Now, not everything in that statement applied to my situation, obviously. But it does really encompass the message I would relay to my younger self. Pain's temporary. You deserve better. And in the long run, no one will care except the one that matters the most. You. My parents might have been disappointed in me, but honestly, I think they would have understood. They saw the kind of shit I had to deal with. Provided I tried other avenues first, they probably wouldn't care too much if I got into a schoolyard scrap. Probably. I might have faced a suspension from school, but that really doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, it really didn't matter. I was scared that would go on to some kind of permanent record that would cause me to not get into university or something like that. What would have mattered is the self-esteem and the confidence that would have materialized as a result of not putting up with that crap, standing up for myself, and demanding the respect I deserved. Now, could fighting have made things worse? Absolutely. But I explored many of the options that were at my disposal back then, and I'm still scarred from those interactions 30 plus years later. I think I'd be more than willing to take that risk. Now, to be extremely clear, I'm not condoning violence. Period. I'm not about to go pick a fight with a stranger today because they cut me off in traffic or something. But as a child or a teenager, sometimes bullies only speak one language. So what's the lesson here? People are complicated? Yep. Bullies suck. Absolutely. Do we all deserve respect? Definitely. What's a lesson I can take away from this? Well, bottling up my feelings and storing them away hasn't worked. Conflict and confrontation can be scary. The possibility of unintentionally burning bridges and tarnishing relationships is just part of human interaction and can't be avoided. By doing this, I'm doing the opposite and sharing my messages with the world, particularly the people closest to me. Might be time to try the opposite here too, and earn the respect that I deserve. Thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care and be kind.